on. I didn't wait till I turn on the recorder too.
Okay. And we're going to do a little comparison of all 5 of us. You might learn a lot more than you would by just me talking, by comparing all 5 of us, because the biggest problem in third world wheelchair access, in my view, is that the designs aren't good enough to be cheap, to be long-lasting, to work as well as they need to be so that people can live independently in unpaved countries. And
can you give me a moment to actually introduce you?
oh, sorry.
Okay. All right. Ralph Hotchkiss is an inventor and the lead designer of Whirlwind Wheelchair International, a nonprofit company located in Berkeley. Its mission is to make it possible for every person in the developing world who needs a wheelchair to obtain one that will lead to maximum personal independence and integration into society. At San Francisco State University, he taught wheelchair design and construction, a course in which students built a complete wheelchair in a third world appropriate shop. Ralph is a graduate of the Oakland College of Physics and in 1989 Arthur. Ralph.
Thank you. So, the biggest cause of injury to wheelchair riders is falling out forward. That's true worldwide. There have been, in the United States, counts of emergency room visits by wheelchair riders, and the biggest reason that we go to the emergency room is because we were rushing home. It was at night. We were hurrying to get out of the rain. We hit a little crack in the sidewalk. Bam, there we are, flat on our face with a broken femur, a concussion. I've had a good number of those injuries. I used to fall out of my chair once or twice every year, usually in a situation at night, rushing to get somewhere. And chairs have typical chairs, regular wheelchairs. All of ours here are better, but not in my opinion quite safe enough so that I wouldn't fall out. But a typical wheelchair has a 16-inch track length between front and rear wheels, and a 26-inch high center of gravity. How tall would a Chevrolet be, or a Toyota, either one, if you applied that ratio to its height of center of gravity and track length? 3 stories tall. That vehicle hits a crack in the sidewalk and it falls on its face. Well, so do we. It's an expected. Any good mechanic or anybody who's studied engineering could work out the numbers very quickly and show that's an unsafe vehicle, and they are unsafe. The chair I'm riding has a 50% longer track length than typical, but it's also shorter because of a special wheel invented in Zimbabwe that I'll show you in a minute. A special front wheel that allows me to put the front wheels instead of behind the footrest and the footrest sticking way out like a cowcatcher of a train. I can put the front wheel under my toes without raising my knees. And that allows me to have a shorter chair with a 50% longer wheelbase. And that means that when it tips, my seat of my chair is tipped back a little. That helps me keep from falling out. I have a high-level disability right on the line between paraplegic and quadriplegic. So I would fall. Well, this helps too. A handrail helps, but so I can roll forward, and the chair doesn't tip forward. There, now it's up 2 steps and down 1 in the front, but it still isn't tipped that far. There, now 1 up. Easy. Really no problem. Quite safe. The first chair I ever did this was just like yours. Ferranda's chair has a long wheelbase, and that's enabled by the fact that her front wheels don't swivel. Show how your front wheels go sideways without swiveling. That allows her to make a long wheelbase and a nice short chair because her feet fit right between those big front wheels. Whichever roller, those wheels have 6 times 4, 24 rollers on each wheel. Little rollers. Whichever roller is on the ground or 2 rollers goes sideways. So you don't need all that big swiveling space. Tony, can you show how much space your front wheels take when you swivel them all the way around? Look at that. That's an 8-inch diameter wheel. It requires a full foot diameter circle to swivel in. And if his legs weren't so conveniently short, he would have to put the footrest way out ahead, or the front wheels way out ahead. But the whole chair ends up being very long in that case. So my chair, I'll show you in a minute how I get away with having a long wheelbase on a short chair with these front wheels. Invented about 30 years ago in a big size for push carts in Zimbabwe. They're called the Zimbabwe wheel. And there I am again, tipped forward, but no risk of falling over forward. In the, 17 years that I've had this longer wheelbase model chair, I have not been able to fall over frontwards, not even once. And I try to find out where the instability point is, how close I am to falling. Not close enough to have made it fall ever. And I ride crazier than I ever used to because I'm no longer afraid. There's the front wheel. It's so wide, over 3 inches wide, and a 4-inch diameter wheel, that it floats over the holes in the ground and it smooths out the travel. For example, if you're going over a cobblestone street or a gravel road, these will sail over something that even this one would be tending to fall into the cracks of. This is an 8-inch wheel, this is a 4-inch wheel. The wider the wheel, the smaller diameter you can make and get away with it. There was a very good basic book written on automobile design that gave a formula for the wider you make it, the smaller you can make it. And that was to push car wheels, which back when that book was written, car wheels were very big. They were like wagon wheels, and they were trying to get them smaller. And the author was saying, well, you can do that by making the wheel wider. The book was written in 1898, and everything they said is still true. I followed their formula, and it worked. It worked just fine. Check out the flexibility of this wheel. It's very light. It has very little rubber in it because it's cut away on the sides. That allows it to walk over very rough ground, just sail over it, just nice. Even on the beach, those will not sink in like a regular chair will, though when I do go on a real beach, I have to put in double rear tires. And I do that by letting the air out of this one, putting in another tire alongside it, but no inner tube. And then just pumping this one up instead of the 50 pounds per square inch only to 10 or 15, as low as I can run it and still roll okay. And in fact, I can cross all the way across Copacabana, for example. That's where it was first invented. One of the prettiest beaches in the world, and I really had to have something that worked. Well, some of the Brazilians helped me figure it out. So this wheel has just a bicycle hub in the middle for the bearing. Very cheap, very, very good bicycle wheel. Very, very, very good bearing design. Bicycles have bearings that are designed much better for dirt and for easy rolling than the modern seal bearings that are in all the machinery practically of today. The difference is that, let's see, in a regular sealed ball bearing, the groove and the outside and the inside, the two grooves, are only 2% bigger than the balls that are rolling in them. If you get dirt in there, the dirt stays in and it just grinds and destroys the bearing. They are sealed, but the seals are not really sealed. They're kind of leaky seals. And a bicycle, by comparison, has grooves that are 50% bigger than the balls. So the balls are only riding on a little line of steel of the races, the inner and the lower races. I don't know if that is, I'm describing enough, well enough that it makes sense. But because the bicycle is riding on that thin line, when dirt gets in there, the ball has space to plow the dirt to the side. If you take it apart a bicycle that's been run on a farm for years and never been lubricated and the bearings have never been cleaned, it'll usually still work. There'll be a thin line of clean metal in the races, and the balls will be just rolling there on a narrow patch. Huge difference in bearing design. There was a big argument in the 1890s over which kind of bearing is better. Well, the answer is, for what? A bicycle has low loads and lots of dirt, and it needs to ride easier than a bearing that's pushed by some big motor. People need the easiest bearings they can get, and they've got them in the bicycle. So we use that bearing here. The wheel. The wheel just is what we needed to make it, because of the width we can make it so small that, again, it's going right under my toes. My heels are hanging down lower. My knees are the same height they would be on a regular chair like yours. You have your footrests at the lowest safe height. It's still not a very safe height, unfortunately, but you have 2 inches of clearance. That's always said to be the minimum clearance. That's what I have under my heels as well. And look at the difference in length of these chairs. Yours, again, how long is that wheelbase? This is a 24-inch rear wheel, so it's 12 inches to here. You're only 1.5 inches further ahead. So this one has a 13.5-inch track length, 26-inch high center of gravity, typically at your belly button height. Hit a little obstacle and blam, you're on your face again. How many times have you fallen?
More than I can count.
Yeah, really?
Maybe my guesstimate would be 30 times. Or maybe
30
40.
times. In how many years?
Going backwards if I don't have a tip bars,
Yeah, that's another way we
I
fall.
will go flat on the mat.
Yeah. Huh. So most of us fall if we're outdoors, independent and active. Falling backwards is another issue, but it's usually not as injurious as falling forward at speed. A lot of broken femurs, concussions, etc. So if I put our chairs axle to axle, look at the difference in length. Again, I have put your front wheels backwards so that we can see the comparative track length. My track length is considerably greater, but my overall chair length is less, if you count his toes especially. So, very interesting, the differences between all these chairs. Fernanda, your chair, when did it come out on the market? 2014. Okay. I built that chair in 1977, but it was hand-powered, an identical chair basically, and I had bicycle chains going from the rear wheels that would force the front wheels to turn, so I had full four-wheel drive, and of course so do you. It's a great thing about that chair. The four-wheel drive works so well. You have belts inside, right? Right, belts from the rear wheels driving the front wheels. I could go backwards up a high curb. I could go backwards through pretty deep snow. Couldn't go frontwards very well because it would still tip over backwards. And if you put a tail wheel on, well, that sticks in the snow and really slows you down.
My wheelchair, like, tomorrow we get to go in the snow, but, if I'm in the snow,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be digging down.
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
You'll sink right into the snow. You'll be stuck. Yeah. On this one, I don't even need to put double tires on to go through the snow, because a fellow about 25 years ago, wheelchair rider up in Minneapolis, invented a way of making tire chains for wheelchairs that works very well. You just pop them on and away you go. You can take them off and let them hang on the fence outside the house. They don't drip on the floor. They work great. And those with these front wheels, it's a nice working package for
yeah.
snow.
And then, let's see. And then, I don't have to carry my backpack, all my stuff together. I have wet, cockeyed on the floor in my house,
You-
Seattle.
You carry mud into the house on your tires.
Yeah, I carry mud in the house on my tires. Without my tip bar, Seattle, I remember last summer, I was out on a deck, did not have a tip bar. So I landed backwards on my head. Remember, a deck is more harder than the carpet, cause that's concrete.
Mm.
That's, yeah.
Yep, so anti-tip bars, real important for if you don't have really good control for balancing.
Yeah.
And the downside, of course, is you can't tip back far enough to pop a wheelie and climb a curb very well. And it's even hard for somebody to help you up a curb if the curb is more than a small one, because the anti-tip wheel stops you from tipping back enough to even set your front wheels up.
wheelchair is really wonderful. And I don't know how much you said, how much it costs, but I'm gonna look into it.
How much does yours cost?
Well, probably. I remember my wheelchair was in a shop and they wouldn't give it back to me. And the people from the shop called my brother and said, "We're not giving you your chair back." So, how am I gonna move around? Without a wheelchair, how people like Tony and you moving around? We can't.
Those of us who need kind of custom chairs, like yours is very custom, a loaner is almost useless. Somebody can maybe push us like in a wheelbarrow, but
So we finally, this chair, we were rental wheelchairs, and every bump I went over, the rental flew backward on me. So
the what flew backwards?
the rental
Oh, the rental wheelchair. Yeah, they tend to be a bit on the high side and
Because
short side. The standard chairs.
the wheelchair, the base of the wheelchair couldn't give me the independence to go over bumps
Yep.
on sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'll be on my face.
Yep.
that would be, yeah, if I was out cruising around and like, you know, curve
Mm-hmm.
comes down and yeah,
Yeah, lots of risk. Every aspect of the wheelchair design has usually numerous compromises in it. Things that, everything you make a little better, something else gets worse. Seems like it's almost always the case with a,
300, I'm guessing, but this wheelchair, to get it out of in-town was about 3, then when they give it back to us. So, think of a car. If a car was about 600, and a wheelchair is about more, with all the doohickeys,
3,000.
$3,000.
Yeah, typical. Typical 3,000 is a typical price for a high quality, lightweight, modern wheelchair. Yours folds, mine folds. Yours folds. No? Yeah? No? No? Okay. This is your chair is very interesting, and I like how you've designed it for yourself. Basically, you must have had to twist the arms of the company a bit to get just what you needed.
No, this is a Quickie GPS. It was actually designed this way.
Quickie is the first company that kind of broke through the old design in 1979.
Yep.
Fresno.
Yeah. The
Fresno,
founder was
California.
One of the first Olympic wheelchair athletes, I think.
She was in her 20s. She crashed her hang glider, and they gave her a wheelchair. And she said, "Good God, this weighs more than my whole airplane." And so she and a couple of inventors went to work in a garage, and now before long they had the largest ultralight wheelchair manufacturer in Fresno, California.
At one point, I had 5 wheelchairs in my garage. And I kept going back to this one. And I've had this since about 1995. And I just keep going back to it. And I keep changing the wheels every now and then and changing the upholstery. And I love it. It's a part of me. I can feel everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it fits you just right.
Yeah.
Let's see your balance point.
I don't like to go backwards. I have fallen over backwards a lot.
Uh-huh.
So I used to have my wheels up closer this way.
And it was
And I'd fall
tippier.
over a lot. And one day, before work, I had 2 laptops in my bag.
Uh-huh.
And I was reaching way down at the bottom of my bag, and my chair fell over. And I landed on my elbow like this, and I broke my collarbone. I called my boss, and I said, "Oh, I'm not going to come into work today." And but I have an electric wheelchair at home, so I just hopped in it and healed up. And
So that's a great example of the trade-offs in wheelchair design.
I have an electric,
I opted for stability.
Yep.
I have an electric wheelchair too.
The downside of that stability is that you work twice as hard as you did when you're on
I have to push harder.
when you're on a side slope, especially like most edges of streets where we are, and most sidewalks are tilted for drainage, and the weight on your front wheels pulls the front wheels downhill.
Yep.
And in order to go in a straight line, you have to drag one hand and push only with the other. I change sides of the streets every few blocks so I can wear out the other arm.
That's what I do. That's
Yeah.
what I do. I
Yeah.
switch sides in the street
Yeah.
as I work out.
Yeah, and so that's the trade-off.
But I can go really fast.
I'm sure you can.
The stability makes me confident.
I've worked on many different wheelie bar designs that are spring-loaded or counterbalanced, so that when I pop a wheelie, the wheelie bar allows me to tip back, allows me to tip way back. Almost until I'm tipping over, but then it stops me. And if I with those, if I race hard enough into a curb, I can get up a bigger curb than I can with this one. This one's easier to climb curbs than typical because a long wheelbase means less angle of tip to raise my front wheels by a given height. So I can charge the curb and do the wheelie right at the last minute and go kablam up the curb. It's
I popped myself right out of my chair.
Yeah, well, and that's why my whole seat is tipped back by 12 degrees like a car seat. That means that my butt is kind of stuck in there. So I can run into a curb. For example, if I'm trying to climb a curb and I pop the wheelie a little too late or a little too low, blam, I go right into it. But I don't fall out. I have yet to fall out forward. Well, a little. Yeah. Rachel, could you show us your chair? It's also way different and custom designed by and for you. Your choice of options is pretty important. You let's see your balance angle. Look how low her tilt is. I have to tip further even, especially if you stay sitting up. If you stay sitting up, I'll bet you can balance with those wheels only an inch off the ground. That means that when you're running, maybe 2 inches, when you're running on the sidewalk, a smaller percentage of your weight is on the front wheels than any of the rest of us. So you don't have to worry too much about side slopes. You can probably coast across a driveway crossing a sidewalk, and it doesn't pull you hard to one side. And that means that you can go faster with less energy than any one of us, by far.
Everything in terms of the trade-off, pretty much everything that you'll see in the sitting position is to optimize for me using less power. So, the design is customized to my body, and it's pretty tight. And the fact that it's smaller means that there's less material, and less material means there's less weight, and the weight has a huge impact.
And this one is also made out of titanium, which means it's nice and light compared. Strength to weight ratio is way better than steel. Mine is the heaviest of the bunch, except for your batteries make yours 250 pounds. Yeah, mine is 45 pounds. Yours is probably 20 pounds or 22 pounds or something like that. What's that? 7. What's that? That would be 16 pounds. Is that right? Yeah.
Hey, Rob, I want to ask a question.
Yes.
I mean, all of us here have the seating capacity, whether it's power or manual. And what I'd like to see in the near future, hopefully happening now, would be some level of suspension for our seat, rather than, because it's so rigid, because we feel every bump, whether I'm on a power chair or a manual.
Have you ridden some of the newer power chairs that have four-wheel independent suspensions?
Yeah, I'm looking more of a suspension, so my pelvis is kind of like more or less hanging and not absorbing the ride.
There are some great bus seats and truck seats. Most of the buses in the area, at least AC Transit has them, a Recaro seat that has lots of flexibility, and that's really designed to solve that problem. There were good seats like that going all the way back to the 40s and 50s. And the technology, if it was lighter and more compact, as it is in, for example, helicopter seats, very light, that might be almost ready for us to adapt to wheelchair use. None of us has the suspended front caster fork. A lot of chairs now have it's called the Frog Leg. That's one of the brands, the leading brand in it. The front forks swing back a little bit and push on a rubber spring, sort of. So that takes out some of the bumpiness. Yeah, but that is an issue. And the more tens of thousands of miles we put on, the more it kind of wears out our backs,
Yeah.
especially if we're riding in a country where they only have cobblestones and unpaved roads. So,
Seattle has uneven sidewalks. I remember seeing a wheelchair flip back, almost hitting the head, going down the hill.
okay, so we've seen a lot of progress, and much of the progress that we've seen in the last, since 1979, when a many-year monopoly of wheelchair manufacture was broken by the U.S. Antitrust Division of the Justice Department. That kind of broke the monopoly open, and dozens of new companies came in and competed. They were no longer afraid of illegal anti-competitive activity by the monopolist. It was illegal, but it still happened for 20 years, more than 20 years. And progress began, and that's where these ultralights came from. This was the first company. This was a California woman who, in her 20s, crashed her hang glider. They gave her a wheelchair. She said, "Oh my God, this weighs more than my whole airplane." And she has led this company to kind of set the standard for the others, and they're all making way, way, way better chairs than the old hospital standard that was the one that had the monopoly from Everson Jennings, 1950 to 1979. Yes.
So you talked about the differences between our wheelchairs, but our wheelchairs, or at least some of them, I think, are designed for the US.
For what?
The US.
Yes.
Not for developing countries.
Yes.
Can you talk us through maybe what some of the design differences would be?
Sure. Let's turn on the pictures. Thank you. Okay, so 80% of the people in the world don't have a wheelchair yet, who need one. And they're the ones who live in the 80% of the world that doesn't have the money yet. And that $3,000 price, just out of the question for most most users in developing countries, just out of the question. $3,000 is more than most people make in a year, even people who have pretty good jobs. There's a classic chair like the one that was all we could get. I started riding in '66, and a chair like that was all I could get. It lasted me half a block. I destroyed it on a crack in the Chicago sidewalks. And I had to be dragged back to the hospital, and I showed it to the manufacturer, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, that's beyond repair. We really can't fix it, but no problem, we'll give you another one just like it." Well, that got me going. I had built bicycles before then, and I could see that most of the failures were explainable. They were predictable. There was no excuse for most of the failures. Bicycles were way, way better. There's a typical pile of wheelchairs in a developing country. It's behind a hospital. Donated chairs come in from all over the wealthy parts of the world, but they don't last long. Often just a few weeks or months, and then they break in a way that they're beyond repair. Whoops. So I started working in developing countries in 1979. I visited Nicaragua. They had just finished a civil war, and a lot of people were newly disabled. I met 4 kids sharing one chair, and they would kind of take turns with the chair. Somebody would get the chair one day, and they would go clear across Managua, usually visiting a girlfriend, and the chair then would break and fail, and they couldn't come back until the next morning. Of course, they liked that. But then they would take it to a local blacksmith, and they had a local blacksmith who really understood what he was doing and taught them why the chair was failing. They not only fixed it whenever it failed, they reinforced the other side of the chair so the other similar part wouldn't fail. When I met them, they had 20 parts that had failed and been welded again, reinforced, redesigned. They knew more than the U.S. industry together. The five of them knew more than the U.S. industry together. I've been visiting U.S. manufacturers since '66, just going to all of them and trying to find out what I could learn and get their help in making their chairs better, and getting pretty much nowhere. So they started up a shop in Nicaragua. They heard of other groups in other countries that were trying to fix chairs. People were mainly getting these donated chairs and breaking them and reinforcing them and doing just like their blacksmith had done. There was a group in Kenya. Here's the kids of the wheelchair factory in Kenya. And their parents are all out there fighting to earn a living, paying for their kids to go to school, doing a great job of living independently in a situation that's so difficult that to see them doing so well just blew me away. Here's Mexico. Here's the first really good long wheelbase chair I ever saw. If you look below the wheels that he's assembling, spoking, his front wheels are way ahead of his rear wheels. He lived up a creek bed. To get to his house, there were no roads. He had to go up a creek bed. He had a hell of a time in the rainy season. This is in western mountains of Mexico. And so he had made his own chair, all by himself, just taken remains of a few broken chairs and put them together and made it real long. That long was good enough that his front wheels wouldn't sink in the mud and sand at the bottom of the creek. And he could actually ride that home and to work here in this little wheelchair factory during the rainy season. So this is 1979. I met him in '81. We met others in the Philippines that had been building chairs for a few years. And together we all just put all of our ideas together and tried to make chairs that wouldn't fail. The American chairs, if you'd go down a curb, tip to one side, slam down hard, you could bend the axle, you could break the axle, you could ruin the front forks. The front forks, if I would do this on one of those chairs a few times, the forks would get bent to the point where the wheels would be rubbing on the frame. No excuse for that. Bicycles don't do that. I had ridden my bicycle over railroad tracks every day when I went to high school, and I would just slam across these tracks. It was great fun, and the bicycle never failed. That's because they designed the bicycle to be a little bit stronger, not much, but a little stronger than the forces that a typical weight person, say 220 pounds, who was very active and very athletic, could possibly put into that bicycle. If you're heavier, if you ride rougher, then a standard bicycle will fail. So they still do, always have, made special bicycles for 250 pounders, 300 pounders. But the regular bicycle designed for 220 pounds, this chair, which again our network of builder inventors, rider inventors came up with, is basically just taking the bicycle of the 1890s and trying to apply those design principles and those design techniques, those tricks, to the wheelchair of 1980. Here's one of the fellows in Nicaragua. Here he is straightening out a hand rim. He had just bent it and welded it together. You buy tubing in 6-meter, 20-foot lengths. And he had made a tool around which he would hand bend this tubing. He would take a 20-foot piece of tube and make 4 hand rims out of it. Then he would cut them apart with a hacksaw and weld them together where they touched. But sometimes they weren't quite straight, so this is how he would straighten them out. One of the others in Nicaragua, welding the handmans back together. His chair again, custom made just for him. That was one of the early ones with the Zimbabwe front wheel. So this picture is fairly recent. It's about 1995 or later. Here's one of the 4 people who started the shop in Nicaragua. 2 mechanics, me as an outsider, helping when I could. This is 1980. They had made a dozen chairs or so. They had come up with a simple design. Notice it's a triangle side frame instead of a box. Well, bicycles taught us that. Triangles are stronger than boxes. And they weigh less, and they cost less, so why not? And we were trying to make a chair that we could sell for under $150 and still pay our expenses. So we came up with this chair. We still had imported front wheels, but we had gone to a tubular front fork, much, much stronger and lighter than the bar forks that were common in those days. Everything was made there. Everything was made by hand. The chair cost under $150. But we couldn't sell them because they looked too rustic. They were kind of grubby looking. And the imports were chrome plated in those days. They were the old hospital boxes, the ones we think are the ugliest chairs in the world now. But then that's what people wanted, especially the medical people, a shiny chrome plated chair. But we found a way of selling these finally, after sitting on those chairs and really losing money and getting nowhere. A bunch of the mostly people who had been injured in the war in Nicaragua wanted to show that they would be participants in their society, that they needed to finish school, they needed to get jobs, they had the right to raise their children and do what they could possibly do. They weren't going to be left behind, and so they held a marathon clear across Managua, and Telma here entered and beat them all. Left them so far in the dust behind that within 2 weeks we had sold all the dozen chairs. And now there have been 5 shops in Nicaragua. They're still making chairs locally. And many, many new ideas have come out of the group of people down there who does that work. I'm now working steadily in Nicaragua, spending part of each year there. And year before last, I married this woman. Here she is on a much newer chair with a Zimbabwe front wheel, folding frames, see the X-brace under the seat. A very simple chair. Same triangle side frame except curved. That curve actually lowers the stresses. When you ram into a curb, the whole chair flexes by about 3/8 of an inch, and it cuts down the forces a lot. And so this picture is 30 years after the previous picture. Here's some women in Mexico. Many of the good ideas have come from women in our now 39 years of working, 39 years of working in developing countries. This is in San Luis Potosí, north of Mexico City, a long drive. And one of the things that came up was this cable, this adjustable cable in here, which is a part of the structure of the folding frame, just a simpler, lighter, nicer way to make it. And they again had a bunch of other ideas. Men and women tend to come up with improvements in different parts of the chair. The guys want to go fast and show off. The women want to reach the kids on the floor, want to cook on the floor if that's the custom in their house. They want to be able to get up and down into the chair. We used to have a second seat on our chairs. Unfortunately, other changes in the design made it so there wasn't room for it, but we're looking for another way to do it. But you could be sitting on the floor. Somebody even with my disability, fairly high level of disability, I'm a T2 spinal cord injury paraplegic from 66, motorcycle crash. I would be on the floor, I could sit on the footrest, then I could sit up here, then I could sit up here, just like steps. This step is now a little bit too big for me. I need to have something else nearby that I can help lift myself with. But yeah, these folks, again, lots of good ideas. This is Sharifa of Uganda. 2 women there run a wonderful wheelchair shop, and the 2 women have 9 children between them and 4 husbands, or they have had along the way. In a lot of cultures, men are just embarrassed to be together with a disabled woman. They will not stay past 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning. They disappear. Well, these women just accepted that as a fact and said, okay, but we still need children. Who's going to take care of us when we're 110? And so they got 9 children, and 4 of those children work in the wheelchair shop. They're great welders, great mechanics. They really know what they're doing. That hub, a lot of the design issues don't have to do with the whole chair. They're just the little details. The details, like making a good hub. We cannot use a bicycle hub because bicycle axles are way too weak. They'll do that, and a bicycle axle will bend like a pretzel. And so we have to make our own hubs somehow. We've had at least 12 different hub designs. The one I have on this chair is the best ever, but in that it's the longest lasting, the spokes tend to loosen up and break far less on it. It's got aluminum flanges here. The aluminum is soft. The spokes will dig into the aluminum, and kind of each spoke will cut its own groove. And the fact that the spoke is so nicely supported means that the spoke doesn't shear off near the head, doesn't break. This one is a wonderful hub, but it has to be made in China because it takes probably a $500,000 piece of equipment to make it. It's made out of a large golf ball sized piece of aluminum. They put in a six direction 250-ton press, and it goes blam, blam, blam. This thing is big. It wouldn't fit in under this roof. And out comes this hub. Then they just polish it off, drill 36 holes in it, and it's ready to go. This is a great hub. Then the whole hub with bearings costs under $3. Wonderful price, wonderful hub, but we can't get it to Uganda because they don't have the cash to buy 1,000 of them and have them shipped and then have them sit on the shelf for a couple of years. They need to kind of work day to day, and same in Nicaragua, same in many of the 40 countries where we've tried to help people build chairs.
Close to the end.
Yep. Okay. Oh, let me whiz through. Anyway, so hubs. I now have a new design that's just as good as this, but we can make it cheap anywhere with a saw that cuts holes in. Here's Sharifa and Fatuma, the 2 women who run that shop. They're going down their curb with their hottest new model, the long wheelbase. That's it. And the puzzle is hardly started. There's so much that needs yet to be done.
Well, thank you very much, Ralph. And if anybody wants to come down, we can stick around for a few minutes and check out Ralph's chair to show you all the great features of it. Thank you. Have a great weekend. See you on Tuesday for presentations.